Hi, class. It's Professor Corbett again. We're past the halfway point. Hooray, hurrah. We're moving forward very quickly. Keep up the good work on the discussion boards. I've been reading them. Look very good. Remember, post about a paragraph for each question. I've tried to make these questions as perhaps provocative as possible, meaning that you think about the response you might want to provide. In some cases, the responses, of course, are different from one student to another. You have different opinions, different thoughts on things. So keep up the good work and keep doing that. And if you get a chance, look at the other students' comments and perhaps post a response to those. But because this is such a quick semester, like 4.5, not even quite 5 weeks, I'm not expecting you to do that. I'm just expecting to put your own comments up. So in other courses, when I run this course as a 14-week semester, there's a lot of interaction between students, but because there's only like 4 weeks here, I'd rather just focus on putting your own stuff up and thinking about, what the issues are and how you would like to talk about them. So going forward this week, we'll start with Chapter 8. Chapter 8, as well as some of the other chapters, deal with the succeeding chapters here, deal with things that support the fire department, things that are not perhaps the mission-centric putting out fires, but things related to putting out fires. So the first one, again, is Chapter 8 that deals with support functions. That includes all sorts of stuff, from vehicle maintenance to radios to the computers that a fire department uses, and other types of support functions. So again, that sort of keep the fire department operating. A fire department can't operate without vehicles. A fire department can't operate without radios for the most part, and for all intents and purposes, computers are central to what we do now. So central that when it comes to dispatching and report writing and things, going backwards in time is probably not a good thing. I can tell you from my own experience that many years ago, when FIS, you've read about that already, National Fire Incident Reporting System, the reports that are generated by every fire department typically, and for every fire, those reports were done on paper with typewriters, and somebody had to manually, of course, type all those up, and then those were sent to the state, and from the state they then went to the federal government. Somebody had to manually enter all that information into this big computer database. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine doing your reports by typewriter? It wasn't the easiest thing, and a lot of firefighters were not really particularly interested in spending hours and hours writing reports and things. They'd rather be putting out fires. But that comes with the job, and we talk about NFIRS and data and things. It's an important piece of what we do. So IT is also important as far as what kind of things we need to happen. So what things we need for them to do to make our jobs as firefighters easier and more effective. That's really the most important thing. So when it comes to things like that, pretty straightforward. We got to invest money into new apparatus. For example, New York City, has in their union contracts actually require that their apparatus age out at 11 years. It can't go any longer than that. Because as you imagine, New York City, the roads aren't the greatest and they get beat up. They were going to calls all the time and running over pothole roadways and things. So these trucks take a beating. The trucks are very expensive as well. So it's a lot of money involved with apparatus. I mean, the trucks themselves, on average now, over $1 million a piece. So that's a lot of money. To think about replacing them every 11 years or so, that's tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. You're talking about new apparatus. So you've got that issue to deal with. Other kinds of things in terms of support functions, of course, one of the most important ones is the dispatch center that the chapter talks about. And basically, that's where all the calls, of course, come in for service. People have a fire in their home or in their business, or they see a car fire in the highway, or there's a car accident, a car goes off a bridge into a river, people trapped, building collapses, kittens up trees. All those kind of things require somebody to call the fire department first, and it's the dispatcher that plays a critical role in all that happening properly. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that call is handled promptly and properly, that the right resources are sent as quickly as possible. So, dispatchers, again, play a critical role in making sure that the fire department gets there expeditiously and gets there quickly to deal with the situation. The dispatcher's job isn't easy. Sometimes people call for service and stuff are, of course, very excited. They're screaming, crying, what have you. And so the dispatcher has to sort of extract that information from the person to try to figure out where the address is, what is actually happening, and then go from there. In the old days, once the call is received and the address and what have you was written down, they would manually actually decide which firehouses are the closest. And in New York City, it's a pretty complicated situation, but they made it very simple by literally using street intersections. And so you read a little bit in the text about fire boxes, fire alarm boxes. And so those, they're still in some parts of the city in the Bronx and in Queens and things, but in Staten Island, but for the most part, they're gone from Manhattan, they're gone from Brooklyn. Those boxes are on a street corner, they're red. You actually, by John Jay, you see the remnants of some of the posts are still there, but the boxes themselves are gone. But those boxes again, before telephones even existed, people could pull a lever in there and a telegraphic signal would be sent to the fire headquarters. And from there, they'd figure out the code. There would be a unique number for that corner. So a box code, so like 321. So the telegraph would signal 321 and they look it up in the list and say, okay, that's the corner of 59th and 10th Avenue, and off they would send a local fire company. So that sort of geographical distribution of fire alarm boxes continues to this day, in the sense not the boxes themselves, but the intersections, the corners. So literally, there's a box assignment, a fire alarm box, or quote unquote, fire alarm box assignment for just about most intersections in the city. So when a call comes in for a particular address, they look up what's the closest intersection to that, and it's that box that says which particular fire companies are sent to that box. So it's worked out for over 100 years now, and it works pretty straightforward. Now with computers, now of course the computers can actually look at what fire companies are available, who or perhaps they're not available because they're another call or what have you. So it's a little bit more extravagant now, but basically that system of boxes is still used to this day to sort of send the closest units to the call. So again, dispatchers in a city like New York have a very stressful job because you're dealing with disasters literally your entire shift. Different kinds of people calling for different things. People don't call up the dispatcher, tell them they're having a wonderful day and and the sky is blue and what have you. They're calling up because they're in distress, they're being killed or they're dying or what have you. And so those dispatchers have to listen to all that constantly. You can imagine, even for example, what happened in 9/11. Those dispatchers had to talk to people that they knew once the building collapsed, they were dead. So it's kind of a stressful job. So Chapter 8 deals with these kind of support functions, and they all play a critical role in keeping the fire department operating. This next chapter, Chapter 9, deals with training, which of course is an important endeavor in the fire service. Listen, the fire departments in America have to keep up with changing technology. So, for example, most of you have laptops. A lot of you like traveling. Some of you probably travel by air, right? So you're in an airplane, and what happens when your laptop with that lithium battery catches on fire in mid-flight? What do we do with that? Well, there are now protocols, for example, by most of the airlines that how to deal with that. And basically, what it involves is using one of the food tray carts as a container. So they actually take the food out quickly, throw the laptop inside, seal it up. There's certain extinguishers they have on board now that can try to knock the fire down. Of course, they'll try to land the plane as soon as possible, but that's something brand new. We've never really had to deal with stuff like that. Well, guess what? That lithium battery laptop fire is a problem not just on planes but other places, and so we're learning more and more about those things. How to deal with training? Well, of course, as new issues and problems evolve, the ways to deal with them come up at the fire academy, basically. So if you look at a fire academy, its core job is to train new people in the fire fighting techniques, right? So it's for the newest people, but it's also for the veterans as well, because again, with these current issues of, again, weird things happening, different kind of car designs we have now. We have, a lot of battery operated cars with lithium. We've got the computer laptops that I mentioned, all sorts of different kind of energy systems out there in high-rise buildings that use large-scale batteries, not even lithium, but other types of batteries and things. So there's all sorts of hazards that are new. You've seen some on television with some major fires, cladding, which is like the exterior skin or finish or siding of a building, of a high-rise that involves plastics. I mean, we had a bad fire a year ago in London, killed almost 100 people. The fire spread vertically up the outside of this high-rise and killed, like I said, almost 100 people. It's a relatively unknown problem. Well, again, every one of these new things that happens, we've got to figure out a way of sort of learning about them and then training on them. So that training will go to the newest firefighters, but also we'll bring in the older firefighters in for periodic updating and sort of increasing their knowledge about different kinds of hazards and different new techniques of putting out fires, new equipment that we might carry. The fire service is always evolving in terms of the types of equipment that we use. Of course, we use hoses and nozzles and things like that, but there are some cases specialized extinguishing agents that you've learned about a little bit about, and other kind of things. So these are all things that we got to train about. So the training academy is the place where that happens. So it's a very dynamic place. It's a place where you try out new things, a place where, again, new techniques and technologies evolve. So FDNY, of course, has got one of the largest fire academies in the country, and they participate in some really important work on Governor's Island, actually burning some buildings down there to study fire behavior when we open or don't open windows and roofs and things like that for ventilation, altering ventilation techniques to try to figure out what's happening and stuff. So the training academy does that. We actually have training resources also outside the fire department. We have magazines, of course, that give us continuous updates on things. One is called Fire Engineering. It's a 142-year-old magazine. It's one of the oldest trade journals in the United States, and actually, ironically, I happen to be the technical editor of that magazine. And that same magazine has the largest fire conference in the country called the FDIC, Fire Department Instructors Conference, where we bring tens of thousands of firefighters from across the country go to this event every spring in Indianapolis to learn about the newest things. And so we'll have hundreds of classes and hands-on stuff and displays. I mean, it's like the World's Fair of firefighting, basically. And so that again plays a big role, because most firefighters want to keep up to date and try to learn new things and talk with other firefighters about their experiences and things. So anyway, so that's the situation with that. The next chapter, of course, is chapter 11. Hold on a second here. I'm using my book. Yes, no, I'm sorry, 10. Chapter 10. Which is fire prevention, which is near and dear to my heart. I spent about 10 years in Austin and San Antonio fire departments, working as a fire protection engineer, doing code enforcement. So that was part of my life, was doing that kind of stuff. Reviewing building plans, building permits, things like that. Making sure that the buildings were being built to code, basically. That was my job, along with other folks that work with me. To make sure that actually happened and stuff. So I actually work for the fire department as opposed to the building department. Even though the building department is in charge of new construction, we got involved as well, because we had represented the interests of the fire department and the fire code and things like that. So when it comes to fire prevention, of course, that's one leg of the triangle. We call it the 3 E's. So enforcement is one. Education, of course, public education is another. And then engineering is another, building safer, more safely and things. Well, these are always in flux, right? So the codes are constantly changing. We use in New York City what's called the International Building and Fire Codes, and those are typically updated about every 3 years old. New York City itself doesn't quite follow that rapid changeover. We still have a relatively new edition of the code, both of those fire building codes that we're using in the city. Again, the building code deals primarily with the building itself. The fire code deals with the stuff that's going on inside the building, basically. And they go as a match pair. So when it comes to enforcement, the first E letter E. Enforcement, it's the building code that sort of plays that role in the fire code. The education, of course, is public education. We do all sorts of events during the year to try to educate the public about what to do and what not to do during a fire. Of course, we focus on little children's because they're the best learners, basically, and we know that we can instill in them some fire safety and general safety behaviors and learning things. And so we focus on them every year during Fire Prevention Week, which ironically is the first week of October, which coincides with the infamous Great Chicago Fire of 1871, one of the biggest fires in American history. So that's the second E, education. The third one is engineering. So we try to build things better. From a statistical standpoint, the introduction of smoke detectors and some other things that have happened in the last 30, 40 years have definitely had an impact on fires. I mean, I think I mentioned one of the other videos that the number of fires nationally is actually going down. It's not going up, which is a good thing. So that means that fire prevention is working. At the end of the day, fire prevention is our most important objective, right? We don't want to have people have a fire in the first place. I mean, yeah, it's exciting to go to a fire and put it out and things like that, but the real objective is not to have it in the first place. So fire prevention is a very critical function of the fire service. And then finally, chapter 11 deals with codes and ordinances and things, and that's always a topic of great debate. Codes and ordinances are laws basically that are passed to deal, in this case, with fire safety issues, and there's a whole bunch of them. And again, the building and fire codes I mentioned under fire prevention are probably the two most common you'll ever see, basically. But there are other kinds of fire safety related ordinances and statutes and what have you. New York City is chock full of local laws that deal with issues of high rises, deal with issues of safety in particular types of industries and things like that. And so, we've got a whole bunch of regulations that we have to follow. The fire and building codes are sort of at the center of things, but even those don't have enough detail on certain issues. So, for example, if we're putting a sprinkler system in a building, the building code will say, yeah, put the system in, but it's another document from the National Fire Protection Association. We talked about them the last few weeks. The NFPA actually writes a standard for installation of sprinkler systems. They write over 300 standards and codes. So when you're in the world of fire prevention, particularly, and building of fire codes and stuff, there's literally dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of documents that you'll work with over your career to deal with certain issues. Of course, we deal in elevators, for example. Guess what? There's an elevator code, ASME A17.1. You don't have to remember that, but just know that there's a code for elevators. There's a code for everything. So that chapter in the book deals a lot with that, but also deals with the other codes and standards that apply to firefighting itself. So there's this NFPA standard for career fire departments and deployment, how many firefighters you should have on each of your pieces of apparatus and how long it should take them to get there. The whole 9 yards of that. Fire apparatus, we talked about this $1 million ladder truck earlier in this video. Well, guess what? There's a standard that applies just to aerial apparatus and motorized pumpers and things like that, NFPA 1901. And the standard sort of sets the tone of what the minimum requirements are for those types of piece of equipment. So just like anything else in life, I mean, there's usually codes or regulations that deal with the specific issue that you're dealing with. In the fire service, they're literally, like I said, in some cases, hundreds of codes and standards that you might end up interacting with. Now, you won't deal with them every day of the week, maybe once in your career, but a few of them you'll be dealing with all the time. So, again, you don't have to know what these are right now, but just know that they exist, know kinds of the things that they cover and what have you. So, anyway, that's week 3's video for you, almost 20 minutes here. I hope, like I said, you get something out of this, again, these overview videos. And, good luck with the discussion boards. Keep it up. Again, the same situation each week. They go up early Monday morning. They go down late Sunday night. Next week will be the last 3 chapters of the book. And we'll do the same thing early Monday morning, late that Sunday night. And then the following week, that half a week, actually, it's not even a full 5 weeks, but half a week for the final exam. I'll post that early Monday morning. You'll have till Wednesday night to actually complete it. So again, that's not for another couple weeks here. So So stick with these current chapters right now through chapter 11. And then next week we'll do 12, 13, 14. The following week after that we'll do the exam. So I hope you're enjoying the course. Like I said, keep up the good work. Take care.